Sleepwalking is a fairly common sleep disorder. We often think of it in children only, but it can certainly persist into adulthood. And I've seen many, many families where there's several generations of people who are sleepwalkers for their entire life. It's probably what we call an autosomal dominant disorder, where it's passed down genetically, and there's certainly a genetic predisposition to doing this. The actual genetics is not completely sorted out. Sleepwalking often shows up in the younger population, and what happens, it's a mixed sleep-wake state. So when people first go to bed, they slide down into what we call slow wave or delta sleep. And about an hour and a half out, they're supposed to come up to their first dream episode. What will happen is there'll be a partial arousal. The EEG will show a mixture of the slow wave sleep and wake, and people will get up and wander around. And if you watch somebody doing this, they typically don't get hurt. They're typically moving fairly slowly. Their eyes are open. They're actually processing what they see to some extent, so people tend not to get hurt when they're sleepwalking. They go up and down stairs, in and out of doors, and so on. They can't get hurt if they wander outside, and there's been instances of people freezing to death in the wintertime or being run over on the road, and there is certainly some danger associated with sleepwalking. People who sleepwalk in an unfamiliar environment are at risk of injury. So I've had some patients who were on a trip to France and walked out of a second-story window where they'd been a sleepwalker at home, and people were not aware of that on the trip. Sleepwalking typically occurs at that hour and a half time after sleep onset. So it's happening later on in the night. That's not typical. Raises questions of other what we call parasomnias or nocturnal seizures, confusional arousals, and so on. And sleepwalking is different than REM behavior disorder. In REM behavior disorder, people lose the paralysis of active dream sleep. So they're actively dreaming and they get up and they run around and act out their dream. Because they're dreaming, their eyes are closed, and they run into things, and they get hurt. And they can break legs and break necks and jump out of windows. That's a very hazardous sleep disorder, though it's much less common. So it's certainly important to figure out what these things are and what's going on. Sleepwalking can be minimized by keeping a regular sleep-wake schedule, by making sure things that fragment sleep are not happening, noises, the need to go to the bathroom, and so on. But it certainly tends to be triggered by big shifts, such as somebody who has to fly to Korea on business may end up sleepwalking because their internal clock is out of kilter with the surrounding world. Anyway, sleepwalking is a fairly common disorder, but it can be a problem, it can cause injuries, and it can certainly persist into the adult state, and it is treatable when it needs to be treated.